Welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. I'm your host, G.V. Pawan Kumar. It is my pleasure to introduce my guest in this episode, Sutirth Dey. Sutirth is a professor of biology at Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Pune. In this conversation, we will discuss about his journey as an evolutionary biologist. I know Sutirth from our PhD days at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, and I have enjoyed discussing science and many other aspects of science and outside science over the past 20 years or so. In this conversation, you will hear a lot of interesting things as we reminisce about our experiences as PhD students in the 2000s. And specifically, I asked Sutirth what attracted him towards biology and his exposure to game theory, computer programming, and some very hilarious experiences with floppy disks and other things. We also discuss a bit of artificial intelligence and evolutionary biology, how one should look at these aspects from a slightly more evolutionary biology perspective. Sutirth also meditates on learning and education, his thoughts on basic sciences, his PhD experiences. And interestingly, Sutirth also likes to walk a lot, and he does a lot of thinking while walking. And this is something we discuss in the context of solitude and how it is important to really do research. We also have some interesting discussion on his fascination for Qawwali music and his thoughts on social media, specifically on how it is actually influencing our thought process. And we also have a very nice segment on his own reading habits and how it developed, and especially his role in creating some very interesting aspects of a library way back dating to his PhD days. We also have a brief discussion on molecular biology and evolutionary biology, and how there is a very interesting continuum which can be created, and his own experience of creating some excellent pedagogical courses which can cater to the user perspective. And it also has made a very interesting impact on the way education has to be done. So, importantly, there is also a very interesting segment in Bengali and Hindi where he explains some of the aspects of what he does as part of his research. Overall, it was a very enjoyable conversation, and you will see us laughing a lot. That actually is just a reflection of the fact that we are friends for a very long time, and the conversation we have had was truly enjoyable. So I hope you will also enjoy this conversation as we humanize science, which is the main aim of Pratidwani. Hello, Sutirth.
Hi, Pawan.
Welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. I'm delighted that you could make some time to come to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. So, Sutirth, tell us a little bit about your own journey to become a scientist and your career path. And please tell us what were the motivations and also your biographical details as a scientist.
Okay. So I grew up in Patna. Most of my schooling was in Patna. And then for my class 12th, I moved to Noida. And then did my bachelor's in zoology from Delhi University. Then followed it up with a master's in environmental biology from Delhi University. Then did a PhD at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, Bangalore. Finished it in 2007. And then the same year, I joined here at IISER Pune as a faculty in the biology department. So IISER Pune was just forming at that point. And since 2007, I've been here in the same department. I work in the field of ecology and evolution, primarily life history evolution. And two major lines of work are dispersal evolution and microbial evolution in the context of population size and fluctuating environments. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. So now we got to actually go deep into this whole evolution of your own evolution,
Okay.
because I'm kind of very fascinated in the way you have been able to, bring in quantitative kind of aspect into evolutionary biology, and even to a certain extent, as I remember, even as a PhD student, you were doing a lot of things related to genetics. Or something kind of related to population genetics?
No. So my PhD was on population dynamics.
Okay.
So the lab in which I was working was evolutionary genetics lab, but I personally was working on population dynamics, which is like how population size changes over time and space.
Yeah. Because I kind of remember you writing an article called Benefits of Bias. I vividly remember that article, and I assume that was probably in a genetics journal.
That was in Journal of Genetics. The article was on codon bias, but it had nothing to do with my PhD topic.
Yeah. No, because I remember it was also kind of a commentary.
It was a commentary on a paper that had been published by, I think, a German group, and they had shown that if you change the degree of codon bias in Drosophila melanogaster, then you end up getting effects in terms of the fitness.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was obviously evolutionary, so it was within my domain, but it was not what I was actively working on.
So, but before we really jump into the specific and high-end aspect of your work, I'm very curious to know how you became a biologist. Right from your school days, were you interested in biology? Or what was your background while growing up in Patna? If you can tell us a little bit more.
So, my mother, she was a botany person. And prior to that, obviously, in order to do botany, you have to do biology in your class 11th those days. So, she had grown up dissecting, and she had grown up sectioning plants, etc. So, while I was growing up, being Bengalis, we are fish eaters. So the fish used to get cut at home, and she would, show me the entire gastrointestinal tract, the swim bladder, and talk about how the fish swims, how it balances, lateral lines, etc., etc. So I guess that's where it started. And then in school, actually, again, biology is something that I liked a lot. In fact, the situation was so bad that I was almost sure, that I'm probably going to fail in physics. So just before my class 12th exam, I told my mom that, look, there is a very high probability that I'm failing in physics.
This is at the verge of the exam, or?
So this was about a month or so before the class 12th exam.
Okay. That is early sign.
Right, failing in physics. So my mom said that, look, if you are going to take biology later on, then you need your PCB, physics, chemistry, biology marks, right? I said, yes. She said, then failing in physics is not an option, right? I said, I guess not. She said, in which case, start studying. That's about it.
Okay.
So, I studied physics, I studied chemistry, and, for the class 12th exam. And I got the highest marks in those two subjects.
Oh, okay.
And biology, I got the lowest marks. But in spite of that, I was very clear that I was going to take biology during my bachelor's. So all my teachers and everybody were like, you are an idiot. Because look at your marks. You have got so good marks in physics. You have got so poor marks in biology. Take physics. It's a no-brainer. And for me, it was equally obvious
that you are not going to
I'm not studying physics anymore.
Yeah. No, because see, over the years, having kind of conversed with you at various instances, I found that the appreciation of a particular topic, be it in biology or anything else going beyond that, there is some kind of a viewpoint which you have which is quantitative. Okay, this is something which is very important as a scientist, obviously, but even as a general kind of a person who is looking at the world, observable world, this is a very important trait. Is this something you learned? Or is this part of your education, or you kind of purposefully developed this?
It happened. And it happened in a very, very peculiar way. Okay. So, when I was in my bachelor's second year, like all biology student, I used to be very afraid of maths. And when, I left maths after class 12th, I was like very happy. This is how life should be. Science math. So, in second year, we had to learn ecology. And our ecology teacher, she came to the class and said that, look, I know all you guys are going to read this Indian textbook. Please don't read that textbook. That's a very, full of flaws textbook.
Okay.
If you read that, your concepts are gone forever. So obviously we asked then, what do we read? So she gave us the names of 4 standard ecology textbooks, all by foreign authors, and said, follow these ones. These ones are much better written. Okay. So I went to the library, I got hold of those books and I started reading them. And because I was reading them, I was liking them, and I kind of went much beyond what was taught in the class.
Okay.
And ecology and evolution, amongst all the subjects in biology, are amongst the ones which are most highly formalized.
Okay.
So the amount of maths in these subjects are generally much greater than most other areas.
Yeah.
So it obviously required me to, follow those equations, look at those derivations, and do it on your own. But you know how it is, right? If they're not teaching it to you in class, it's fun. So that's what happened. And then during the exams, it turned out that my exams went terrible.
Okay. In biology?
In biology, in ecology. So this is the story of my life. Biology I have always been poor. Any and every subject that I have liked, I have done very poorly in the exams. And the ones that I have not liked, by and large, my exam marks have been.
But yeah, I have to mention to the listeners that Sutirth is one of the most popular biology lecturers and professors in the department. This is
in biology, not in maths.
in biology, of course.
Right.
No, but this is a very important kind of an issue, especially for students who may have had some kind of setbacks in their own careers, be it at a younger age or it can be even at a very advanced age. That kind of deters them to really get into a particular subject, right? But in a way that did not in your case. That is something which is very important.
So I'll tell you what exactly happened.
Okay.
So how I became an ecology person.
Okay.
So then I got very bad marks in ecology, and the reason I got bad marks was because most of the questions I had no clue what the answers were.
Okay.
So I obviously came out and asked my friends that could you answer those questions, and most of them said yes. And I said how? They said that particular book that the teacher told us not to study. So I said, but she said not to study, and they said, why did you listen to her?
Okay.
I realized that I have messed up, but what do you do? So then I went for my masters. And in masters, to my utter surprise, I found...
And this was in which place?
This was Delhi University. So my bachelor's is in zoology.
Yes.
Masters is in environmental biology. But in environmental biology, I have a full paper on ecology.
Okay.
So I go to that class. So it was being taught by a very famous professor of Delhi University, Professor T.R. Rao. And the first day he tells us, okay, here are your textbooks. And turns out these are exactly the ones that my teacher had told me in class in zoology second year. So for most of those textbooks, I knew about 50% of that textbook extremely well. So no wonder I did pretty well in his course. And he kind of spotted me. He liked me a lot. And he encouraged me a lot. So he again was, he knew the mathematical aspects. So he was teaching them mathematically. And obviously I was finding it much easier to follow them compared to the other people around me.
So the timeline is roughly around 2000s?
Yeah. So this is happening in 2000, 2001.
2000. Very nice.
So that is how this mathematical thing that you're talking about, that was part of it. The other part of it happened again in Delhi University. So we had a professor of physics, incidentally, who was teaching us computer programming.
Nice.
And you are going to appreciate this, Pawan, that our time, unlike kids nowadays who grow up with their computers, many of us touched a computer for the first time.
Absolutely right.
During our bachelor's and master's.
Absolutely right.
So this is the first time I'm actually touching a computer, and we are being taught programming.
Yes.
And after teaching us some very simple coupled differential equations, etc., this professor of physics at Delhi University, his name was Professor Amitabh Mukhopadhyay. So he tells us, I'll teach you guys game theory.
Okay.
I have no idea what game theory is.
Okay.
But obviously that sounds great.
Sounds great, yes.
So, okay, but he puts a condition. What is the condition? You guys will have to write a program which plays tic-tac-toe with the user.
With the user?
With the user.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
the user gives one move, the program has to give another move, and so on.
But it is all kind of within the specific place, right? It's not like connected through the internet where the user is somewhere else.
This is a point when internet browsing is about 100 rupees per hour.
Okay,
Where is 100 rupees?
Got it.
Okay. And these computers are like standalone things. They are not connected to the internet. Okay. And obviously those days, Stack Overflow and ChatGPT.
Nothing is there.
So he challenges us to do that. Great. So I say, okay, fine. So how do I know how to program? And remember, this is a time when we are, the two major languages are Basic and Fortran.
Exactly. These are the bread and butter.
These are the bread and the butter. So I said, okay, Fortran is too heavy. Let me start with Basics. Okay. So as usual, I go to the library, I check out a book, and I go through the book, and I kind of, get the basics of looping and condition and all that. And then I start writing the program. And then very soon I realized that this is going to take time.
Okay.
So for the next 1 month, I do nothing but read, think about the program, what to make, how the logical flow, etc.
Okay.
And read that book. Now, please remember, I don't have a computer.
Okay.
So I'm actually doing this entire coding on pen and paper. Yes.
Wow, that is amazing. Amazing. Okay.
And obviously, with no help, but a book on one hand and my notes on how to play tic-tac-toe. All right. So I do the entire thing and I actually write the entire code by hand. And then I go to this professor and then I show this to him. And he says, very nice, but you have to code it, you have to write it.
Yes.
So I said, okay, I don't have a computer, so you have to get me access to the computer. So he gets me special access to some computer. So I sit down one day and from morning till late evening, I type the whole thing. Okay?
Wow, okay.
Early days, so one finger.
Exactly. All of us did not know the typing and
Exactly.
so you're literally keep punching.
Exactly. And after the whole thing is done, I tell him that, sir, this is done. So he comes and he runs it. And obviously it doesn't run. There are bugs in it.
Okay.
Right? So then he sits down with me and then he starts helping me to debug the whole thing.
Nice.
Okay. And this is happening around some 7:38 in the evening.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is nobody around. Everybody has left. This man is waiting for me.
Wow.
I'm punching the stuff. So anyway, so it gets partially debugged, but I get back home. And then over the next 1 week or so, he gets me more and more access to the computer and finally I finish coding.
Okay.
Now here comes the interesting bit. So I asked, this was not a task which was given to me, it was given to the whole class, right? And while I was doing this coding and all, I was asking my friends, are you guys coding? They said, yeah, and we are up at it and we are, some of them had computers at home. So I assumed that, they are doing it over there. Once the whole thing was done, I looked back at them and said, okay, where are your codes?
Okay.
And turns out that nobody had even started. I was the only one who had done it. Okay. And by the time this whole thing got over, the semester got over, that it was yearly system at that point, not semester. So, and our exams were here. So basically, no game theory.
Okay.
So I was really sad. But at the same time, I enjoyed the coding process. So I didn't know what will happen out of it, but it was still, seemed something nice.
Yes.
After that, when I went for my PhD, during my first meeting with my supervisor, I'm talking to him, Professor Amitabh Joshi, and just, conversationally, I mentioned to him that I know programming.
Okay.
And he says, okay, which language? I say QBasic. He says, yeah, my son studies in school. He's in class 7. I think those guys are learning QBasic. And then he calls up home and says, hey, there is a guy in my lab. He says, he knows some QBasic. Can you give him the program?
Okay.
So next day, the program arrives in a floppy disk.
Floppy disk, yes. Okay. the black color.
The same icon.
True.
That arrives in a floppy disk. It gets put in a computer.
Okay.
And that computer and that floppy disk, whatever QBasic setup. I mean, those days it was not a setup, just 5 files together, and that was the setup. My entire PhD was on that.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing, huh?
My entire PhD, all the papers that I published, all the coding that I did was on QBasic. And trust me, so many times, people around me, I had physicists like you and others around me, and I was constantly being told, this is kid stuff, go for Fortran, go for C. Okay.
I never told that.
You never did, but there were other physicists.
We had a lot of them.
We had
lots of them, yes.
And the point was, every time I told myself, okay, now I'll learn this. And then I was like, okay, can I see if I can do it in QBasic or not?
Okay.
And I could.
You could.
Whatever was the problem, I could always do something on QBasic by which I was able to do it. And therefore, I actually never learned another programming language in my life. And even today, I don't know another programming language in my life.
So you still use the QBasic?
Okay, nowadays I'm not coding too much. My students are doing it. Good thing about QBasic was that it taught you the logic.
I agree with you.
And therefore, I can look at any Python program and I can decode
roughly the algorithm can
I get the algorithm. Yes. So I have actually been able to debug some of my students' codes just with that knowledge. Nice. If I have to code, I tend to prefer R or Python.
Of course. Yes.
I haven't written the kind of large codes that I was writing during my PhD anymore. Small sort of 30-40 line code.
Absolutely. You're right. See, this is something which is very interesting because, now that there is a kind of evolution even in terms of the computational resources and also the way in which you compute, thanks to machine learning and something called as artificial intelligence, which is also quite interestingly evolving. So these things have very deep connection to evolution per se, in which the whole topic also was studied. So, is there any kind of connection between them, how these kind of programs evolve over a period of time, and also, let's say, the evolutionary biology principles which already have been there?
See, simple principles of evolutionary biology like selection. Okay. You know about genetic algorithms, right? So, those things explicitly use a selection principle. Similarly, if you look at how models like AlphaGo and other deep learning models are trained, the basic principle is the same. You do a variation, you check out whether it is slightly better than the previous one or not. If it is, proceed in that direction. If it is not, change direction.
Interesting.
So that fundamental bit about evolution remains. And these changes that you make, they are analogous to mutations. That
fundamentals always are.
Those fundamentals are always the same.
Yes.
Okay. Whether some principle or let's say some mathematical equation from the evolutionary literature has been directly used in artificial intelligence research or not, I don't know.
That becomes more a specific kind of aspect.
Exactly. But the fundamental stuffs are still.
That's very, very kind of interesting. I also kind of noticed that your MSc was in environmental biology. Can you tell what is that thing? It sounds very important. That is the reason.
Okay, the environmental biology that I learned was an outstanding, amazing course, and I don't think people, too many people are lucky enough to learn that way. Okay. Unfortunately, the course is still there, but the course is no longer taught the way we, learned it. So. At that point, so Delhi University had this rule, it probably still has it, that before a department is established with its own faculty, with its own infrastructure and all, for 10 years, the department has to run in the shadow of some other department and prove that it's a viable department. People are coming and taking admission, etc.
Okay.
So during those 10 years, you don't have your own faculty, but you basically, get faculty from other departments to teach you.
Okay.
And during these 10 years, since you don't have your infrastructure, the batch size is typically small. So when I was studying environmental biology, it was still within those first 10 years of, its evolution. So I was the 9th batch.
Oh, wow.
After that, one more batch and that's it. Things changed after that. So those days, our HOD happened to be Professor C.R. Babu, a very legendary teacher of Delhi University, a very legendary professor of botany. So, batch size is, actually it was 6 at that point. We go in.
Oh, only 6 students?
Batch size is 6.
Wow.
And in order to get into that, you have to give a All India test.
All India test, wow.
Yes. So, I was one of those people who were lucky enough to qualify.
Okay.
So, we go there, 6 of us. And we don't have any classroom or anything. So, we go into Professor Babu's office. He makes us sit down. He gives us one bunch of papers and says, this is your syllabus.
Okay.
Then he gives us another piece of paper and he says, these are your teachers.
Okay.
So these are professors from all over Delhi. Delhi University North Campus, South Campus, IARI Pusa, IIT Delhi, JNU, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Central Pollution Control Board, about half a dozen universities, departments of DU, etc. etc.
Okay. You could become a secretary.
So he says, these are your teachers, that is your syllabus. Your job is to go and learn from them.
Okay. Wow.
That's it. Okay. So the deal was like this. We were given a bunch of phone numbers and we were supposed to call these profs up, ask them when they are free, and whenever they were free, we would go to their place, learn from them, and then go to the next professor who was free.
Wow. Okay.
And obviously, if we liked somebody, we went back to that person again and again.
Okay.
If we didn't like somebody, we forgot to call him.
But exams and all?
So, the way the exams happened was that we kept a track of how many classes we did with whom.
Okay.
And then we submitted that to Professor Babu, and then he submitted it to whatever some admin was there. And then these people were contacted saying that, you took so many classes. So, suppose somebody took more classes, so a little greater weightage in the exam in their portion. Somebody took less classes, a little less weightage, etc. So, those guys then sent questions. So, these questions then were collated together, which became the question paper, and that was the exam.
Okay.
So, it actually went brilliant.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because Professor Babu had chosen the best people from all over the place, number one.
Very nice.
Number two, it was very, very eclectic.
Very nice.
Okay. And think about it. You are not, limited to a department or anything.
Exactly.
I learned about pollution from people in Central Pollution Control Board. Okay. It doesn't get any better than
Absolutely
that.
Right. Absolutely.
And similarly, I learned about environmental impact assessment and environmental policy from the secretary level guys sitting in Ministry of Environment and Forest.
Wonderful.
So they have a very different view about the whole thing. At the same time, I was going to professors in genetics department, geology department, zoology department to learn about these things from a very, very academic
point of view.
So this amalgamation that we got was superb, number one. And on top of that, Professor Babu told us that if you want to learn something which is roughly in the direction of evolution but is not there in your syllabus, don't bother about it. Come to me. It is my task to find you guys a proper teacher for the subject.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So,
supply and demand is taken care of.
Yes. And you have complete freedom to learn from those guys from whom you like.
Wonderful.
Exactly. You can't better that.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay.
Lovely masters.
Yeah, I mean, see, this is kind of very unique. I assume probably students after you did not have this opportunity.
Exactly the point.
Yeah.
I was the 9th batch, then there was a 10th batch, and after that it became regularized. It had its own faculty, and they were all experts, no doubts about that, but there were just 5 or 6, the regular number in a department.
Absolutely. This is kind of a unique experience because, this is also something kind of I can relate to, because even while growing up as a bachelor student or a master student, especially if you are in and around Bangalore and if you are in a college there, you always have access to research institutions. And very similar thing happened. Of course, the guidance was not kind of through a formal course. But we did go and consult few people, and I can see the benefit of talking to people who are really working.
Absolutely. That completely changes your viewpoint. Okay, you don't see stuff as simply things that need to be mugged up for your exam.
Absolutely.
You see those as things that you're going to use.
Use it. Precisely. See, this is a very important aspect, Sutirth, which we're going to expand anyway as we go further, is the value of such kind of real problems in one's education. See, I'm not talking about researchers. Of course, we do kind of go in kind of literally hunting good problems. But while studying, especially at a level of bachelor's or master's, one of the key elements which generally students ask, and which is a very valid question, is where will I use this? Or how is it going to be useful for kind of whatever I do? Do you think there is some kind of a broader context which is sometimes goes missing while we study things?
See, that happens all the time. And particularly, when you are in a college, and let's say you are a lecturer who has been given a particular syllabus, and you have been tasked with finishing that syllabus whatever that means, within the given amount of time. And you have been prescribed that here are the books that thou shalt follow. It becomes very difficult for a person to go out of their way and bring in all these aspects. Okay, and this becomes even more complicated because nowadays you know the pace at which science moves. Okay, take any subject, whatever you are learning now, 5 years down the line, it's probably obsolete.
Absolutely.
So, given that stuff, and given the fact that the syllabus typically does not keep pace with the pace at which science is changing, it's pretty obvious, right, that people who are supposed to do this teaching, they find themselves completely at a loss.
Very right. What would they be able to do?
Exactly. I mean, that way, see, in places like, I said, Pune, where the faculty has some autonomy in terms of deciding their syllabus, they can actually go ahead and do some of these changes.
Absolutely right.
But in regular state universities, regular state colleges, it's
very difficult.
No, it is missing for sure.
Absolutely. See, one of the aspects, since Delhi University, if I'm correct, is also a state university, or is it a...
No, Delhi University is not a state. It's so far I know, it probably is a central one, because people came from all over the country.
Okay, then it is a kind of central thing. Because this is one thing which is very important. If even the state university have to implement some kind of a streamlined way of teaching students, having this kind of input from people who are working at the need not be cutting edge, but who have immersed themselves in research really matters. And state universities, if they can manage to give this exposure to college students, it will be very, very interesting and very important.
No, see, it will definitely be interesting. And if you look at the national education policy, that is precisely what the policy is saying needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Now, that is fine. But the point is, how does one implement it?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you say that, okay, I'll change the syllabus every 5 years or every 10 years, it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably has to be almost year by year basis.
See, this brings me to another important aspect. If you look at the foundations on which all so-called vocational courses are kind of taught or even evolve, they all basically depend on the core courses like biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And these four aspects are kind of foundations for anything what you're going to do. Be it, let's say, pollution, as you were mentioning, climate change, environmental biology, anything what you want. Do you think we, within the framework of schools and colleges, is there enough emphasis given on these core subjects? Because sometimes is there too much of eye on, let's say, engineering and medicine, where because even to do that effectively, you need to have very strong foundations.
See, the focus on engineering and medicine is something that is coming from the students. It is not really coming from, say, NCERT or whatever the state boards. When the state boards are making their syllabus, they are not thinking about those, and they are absolutely right. That's how they should be. I think that problem that you are mentioning, it's a social issue.
Yes.
And I think people need to be made aware of the fact that, you can become good engineers. In fact, you will probably become better engineers if you have a nice foundational, level grasp at these things.
Absolutely. Right.
And see, problem is that everybody just focuses on getting into, big ticket engineering colleges like IITs, etc. And we like it or not, the way to do that is solving large number of problems in very short amount of time.
Yes.
Such that you primarily solve it from your spinal cord and not from your brain.
That's very well put.
That's pretty much how it is. Okay, yes. The entire focus of this, coaching institutes in Kota and other places is how to look at the problem, quickly identify which formula to use, and then solve it in the minimum amount of time, because there is so much.
So much you can. It's like almost like a pattern recognition problem.
It is exactly. Right? That is exactly what it has become.
Yes.
And unfortunately, grasp of foundational aspects and pattern recognition are two different
absolutely.
And it is the students who are focusing on the pattern recognition part.
So yeah, that's just a very, very important point what you mentioned. Now, looking at the way you kind of made a transition from Delhi University to JNCASR. By the way, JNCASR is Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research. And you now start your PhD with Amitabh. Okay, Amitabh Joshi, of course, very well-known biologist. How was your experience now making this transition from Delhi to Bangalore? Then Bangalore, now Bengaluru.
Oh, it was fantastic. So, Professor Joshi himself grew up in Agra and Delhi.
Yes.
And he himself is an alumnus of Delhi University. So, interacting with him was easy. Okay, because it was like Delhi meets Delhi.
Yes.
Interacting with the rest of the group was kind of a culture shock for both them and me.
Okay. In what sense?
So, see, things that for me was like a routine statement.
Yeah.
They found it to be an aggressive statement, and they were like, "Why are you so rude? Why are you, being so, how do I say? Why are you being aggressive about it?" I'm like, "I'm not being aggressive. If I am being aggressive, then you'll probably be, in pain. I'm not being aggressive. I'm just being myself." So, it kind of took a little bit of time. And actually, at some point, even Professor Joshi had to intervene on both sides, telling me to calm down and telling them that, look, this is how many Delhi guys behave. But once we got the frequency, settled, with the lab, after that it was good. It was good. I mean, I cherish my 5-6 years in Bangalore.
Yeah, same here. In fact, those are the best times I had even while as a student there, as a PhD student, and the conversations and the other things. Anyway, we're going to expand on that going further. But one of the aspects which is very interesting is JNCASR as a place, which both of us carry in our memories, especially the kind of environment in which science is done there. It has some very important and deep implication on the way we kind of continue to hold that in our thoughts.
Yes.
Do you want to kind of double click on that a little bit?
Okay.
Because one of the things which the listeners should remember that Sutirth actually still thinks while walking. And this is something common even in ISR Pune campus. And that is a kind of a behavior which Sutirth probably would have caught even before JNC or during the JNC days.
No, see, this is the whole point. People think that I got it in JNC, but that was not true. Even when I was in school and college, I used to walk. So my thinking was always on feet. Okay. So JNC just gave me a brilliant opportunity
to move around. Very nice.
Exactly. So there were several things in JNC that were brilliant. Number one, JNC was the right size.
Yes.
It was not as large as IISc. At the same time, it was not too small.
Absolutely.
So that was one good thing. The second thing was JNC had a diversity. And the diversity was, I could speak to chemists, I could speak to physicists, I could speak to molecular biologists.
Absolutely.
And, the life in JNC, those days at least, was kind of laid back.
Yes.
And the best part was, JNC those days, people who know JNCASR these days will not be able to imagine those days. But JNC those days, it was very difficult to go there, and once you went there, it was very difficult to come out of that place.
Exactly. Literally.
Literally.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
We were in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, therefore, one could, spend a lot of time just thinking about science thinking
yes.
about other stuffs. And there was always a bunch of people around you who would be, as crazy as you,
are, yeah,
or in many ways crazier than you. And you just had to find somebody.
Yes.
So that, I think that remoteness of JNC, particularly in those days, was something that worked in our favor.
In our favor, absolutely.
Whereas in ISC, it was very easy to just, take an auto and go somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're right.
And that is, of course, if you are in pain and you need to go to a hospital, that was in your favor.
Yeah,
but otherwise, on day-to-day life, sometimes it doesn't work in your favor. It's very easy to get distracted.
You're right. That is something which is very, very important while doing a PhD,
yes,
right? Because
yes.
that time what you spend, it may not be kind of loneliness, but a solitude kind of thing. Where it's probably is important factor. And,
yes. So PhD is peculiar, You need solitude. And the difference between solitude and loneliness is loneliness bites, but solitude enriches.
Exactly.
So solitude is required for your own brain process. But then you also need to be able to talk to people, to exchange ideas so that you grow. So
absolutely.
you need a peculiar combination of both. And if you don't have both components, the whole thing doesn't.
The whole thing, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I agree with you. That is something, it's true even as a professor, right? If you look at it to a large extent.
It's true in any line of work where you need to use your brain for creative thinking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is very interesting. Now that you start your PhD 2003, roughly? 2002. And then you start your research. And you now are exposed to one of the probably the best departments in the country related to evolutionary biology. Okay, yes. I think even then Professor Chandrasekhar was still around.
Professor Chandrasekhar was there. Professor Vijay Sharma was around.
The late Vijay Sharma. In fact, great memories. Can you tell a little bit more about the department there?
In those days. So it was just these three people, and Vijay was working on chronobiology. He was explicitly studying the evolutionary aspects of clocks evolving. Professor Chandrasekharan had, I don't think he was doing active research at that point, but he was one of those people who knew a lot.
Exactly.
And therefore just going and chatting with him, just enriched you in marvelous ways.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Professor Joshi was there. Yeah. He was working on life history evolution in Drosophila as well as population dynamics. So it was a small department, but it was an extremely vibrant department.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And those days, actually, Professor Nanjundaya still had a group at JNC.
Oh, Vidyanand Nanjundaya?
Oh,
wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of remember because he used to also sit and read.
Yes.
And I have seen him many a times doing that.
Right. So Professor Nanjundaya's group was still around. And just prior to me going there, I think Professor Ganeshaya and Professor Umashankar's group had left. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, they were also part of JNCASR setup for quite some time.
Very nice. So now, it's kind of almost the place where a lot of chronobiology and also evolutionary biology was there. It also had a unique kind of a laboratory setup beneath the stairs. I still vividly remember a lot of people, students going in and out of that particular laboratory. Can you paint a picture of that particular place where you worked, especially in Joshi's lab? And because that is actually a place which was also very close to my lab when I was doing my PhD. And I really had wonderful interactions, both of course with you and also with Professor Joshi. And could you just give us some kind of picture of that particular laboratory in terms of your work?
It was a very small lab. I mean, we essentially had two rooms, and there was Professor Joshi's office, and in Professor Joshi's office there were two incubators.
Yes,
and just
inside the office.
inside the office there were two incubators, and right next to it there was one computer on which I sat.
Yeah.
Okay, and Professor Joshi used to like 18 degrees Celsius, so it was cold. And the two ACs actually used to blast on the computer in front of which I sat. So I had a very chilly for 5 years. It was very cool. But at the same time, because it was his office, he used to play a lot of music. So a lot of very high quality Qawwali and a lot of
which he still does, I suppose.
Which he still does. He still does, and that is one thing that I have inherited from him, among many other things. So I used to listen to Nusrat a bit, but not to the level at which he used to listen. So he introduced me to a lot of Nusrat and Sabri brothers and these other Qawwals about whom I had no idea. He also listened to a lot of country music and Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and all those guys. So that room was all music, cold. But at the same time, since my sit was right next to his, I was absolutely blessed because I saw some pattern on my computer.
Okay.
The time to take it to him was exactly 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
Because I just had to call out and he would come and look at it. So that way I ended up getting very fast feedback on whatever I was doing. And that was brilliant. And so actually, not only that, because we almost shared our office, I ended up having a lot of interactions with him.
Yes.
So at some point I was making an estimate, probably of all the time we have spent together, maybe about 25% would have been discussing science. And the rest of it have been something completely different.
Absolutely. That's true for Professor Joshi. Anybody who has interacted with him, it is an enriching experience.
True, but the quantum for me is much greater than most people.
Very high.
And the other lab, the main fly lab that we used to call, so that lab had a nice radio.
Yes, I remember.
So you remember that. Yes. And it used to blare music all the time. Okay. So incidentally, that's where I heard a lot of Kannada music. Because obviously, the lab was full of Kannadigas. Lots of Kannada popular music. I actually also heard some amount of South Indian classical as well. And then, so the lab had a very simple rule. The rule was that when you have to work, you work. And once your work is done, you do whatever the hell you want, nobody cares.
Exactly.
So there was no lab timing or anything. So you came when there was work, you disappeared when there was no work. But because, as I said, there was nowhere else to go, even after the work was done, we would sit in there and then we would discuss anything and everything under the sun and beyond it.
True.
So basically, my memory of the lab is obviously a lot of work, but also a lot of discussions. Enormous amount of discussions, and I think those discussions play a massive role in situating you in life.
Yes.
You understand what other kinds of viewpoints can be there, and by and large, you navigate interpersonal relationships.
Absolutely.
And it plays a huge role in making you who you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, that is something which is very crucial in times where one is actually more confined to screens, two-dimensional screens.
Yes.
That is sometimes lost in this.
Yes.
Maybe that's a very important point, right? Because that human interaction is very important.
Yes. And this is something that, nowadays, many places I see, students come to the lab. When they are working, they have some music in their own ears.
Yes.
So it's not a common music that everybody is listening to and commenting to. Everybody is into their own kind of music.
Yeah.
Nobody is talking to anybody.
Yeah.
And then once it is done, everybody is concentrating. Okay. Come on.
Life can't be so serious.
Life cannot be so serious. Okay.
See, even professors are saying that.
See, it is true. And because of which, I won't say that mental health issues were not there during our time.
Absolutely,
they were there.
absolutely. You're right.
But I will definitely say that the quantum of mental health issues has gone up quite a bit.
You're right. You're right.
Okay.
In fact, there is quite a bit of research also nowadays, precisely because of the fact that there is too much of a kind of exposure to the kind of social media also. Does that have any implication, you think?
I would like to think so, because much of social media actually, to use a much malign word, kind of toxic.
Yeah, you're right.
It's I hate this person, I cancel this person, I don't like that, etc., etc. And if you look at the discussion that happens on social media, maybe there are some Facebook groups which are doing a good job, but then again,
it's a very small.
No. More importantly, kids these days are not on Facebook.
Exactly.
Facebook is supposed to be our generation. Exactly. Yeah. And if you look at Insta and other things, where is the discussion? Everybody is broadcasting their views. Nobody is listening.
There is a kind of a monologue most of the time.
Exactly.
True.
And that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. So now we'll kind of broaden the discussion a little bit. Especially, I'm very keen on a kind of a breakthrough which happened during your PhD days, which resulted in, of course, a very big paper with Amitabh. You and Amitabh wrote about it. But it also actually kind of, asked a very important question. Okay, could you please just give us a little bit of background to that work?
So, we were studying, the dynamics of spatially structured populations. And essentially, we were asking very simple questions that how will changing the rate at which these populations are exchanging individuals, the so-called migration rate, how will that affect the dynamics of these populations?
Okay.
And we got some very interesting patterns. We saw that when you have a low amount of migration, then the populations are becoming more stable, and that is because the synchrony between the populations is breaking.
Okay.
And when you increase the amount of migration, they are becoming synchronous. So their population sizes are going up and down at the same time, because of which, the dynamics is becoming more unstable.
Okay.
And then, obviously, we're working with Drosophila, who cares? But what made this work slightly more special was we were actually able to take some very simple models of population dynamics, simple but widely used and widely applicable models.
Yes.
So these are models which are known to work for a very large number of taxa.
So it can generalize the problem.
The generalizability was very high, and we were able to replicate those results.
Nice.
And then when we published those results...
Now, by the way, it was published in Science, although it doesn't matter the journal, but it actually created a buzz during that.
Yeah, it created a buzz, yes, but the fact that it got published in Science created the buzz, not the work.
Not the one. I believe the other way around.
No, the work created a buzz amongst the ecologists. Okay, but for other people it was Science. They never read what. See, there is something cute that I have to say on this. This paper has gathered some reasonable amount of citations. So at some point I became curious to know who are citing us and in what context are they citing us. And to my horror, I find that they are citing us in the context of some statement about extinction, which the paper said nothing.
Sometimes not even the word.
The paper is not about extinction at all.
Yes.
So I became very, very curious that why are we getting cited in a context that we didn't even talk about?
Yes.
And then we figured out that at some point, pretty early on, some review article had miscited us in that extinction context. After that, there are a bunch of papers which are citing us in that wrong context. So basically, those guys haven't even bothered to read our papers.
Exactly. Welcome to the telephone game.
Welcome to the telephone game, exactly. Okay. Which is why I said the fact that it got published in Science became a bigger thing than what was in it.
Absolutely.
But so that particular stuff was very useful, because it showed that this kind of dynamics can be very well modeled, much better than what people had earlier thought using those kind of models. And B, the insight that we got about how these dynamics are operating, those were the insights that we used for the first about 6 to 8 papers which I published after becoming a faculty here.
Okay.
Yes. So it was that line of work in a slightly different form continued in my lab. That line of work continued in Professor Joshi's lab with my students coming after me. And it was pretty enriching. We got quite a few understanding about how dynamics works.
See, one of the aspect of the time in JNCASR, in addition to the biology, what you were doing, there was also quite a lot of interaction, as you were mentioning very nicely. One of the great memories of JNC, especially which I relate both JNC and to you, is the great library.
Book club.
The book library in hostel.
Yes.
Right? Do you want to tell how it started? Because I think you played a major role in bringing that up.
But it didn't start with me. It started with John Thomas and Swaminathan.
Yeah. For listeners, this is actually a library inside the hostel.
Yeah. So I'll tell you precisely what was happening. So again, remember, this is the time when we are at JNC. If you go there, it's very hard to come out.
Yes.
And therefore, we need things to keep ourselves busy.
Yes.
So we had these two magnificent guys, P. John Thomas and Swaminathan. So these guys come up with the idea of creating a book club. So they essentially go around asking for donations. And donations as in, book donations.
Book donations, yes.
And they put together that donation and they...
PhD students were not very rich then.
Exactly. We really didn't get too much money.
Yeah.
So, when these guys were operating, I think 5,000.
Yes.
Then
5 and later
at some point it became 8,000. Yeah, when we were there, I think it became 8,000.
Exactly.
Okay. So they create the book club. So in the beginning, it was one almirah in one room in the hostel. Okay, that's it. There was nothing else. So they run it for some time and then they end up handing over the thing to me. And then when they do that, I said, okay, let's try to see if we can, make it slightly better. So, how much can you do with book donations?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I ended up going to the warden, which those days used to be Vijay Sharma. So I asked him that, hey, look, this is something nice. So can we get some money for this?
Yeah.
So he very kindly arranged some money. So then with that money, I went and I actually ended up purchasing a huge number of books. Partly because I was also, most of the books that I was purchasing was also second-hand books.
From Blossoms,
Select, and the great, Bangalore Majestic.
Exactly.
So, I was, kind of into books. So I ended up increasing the size of that library from one almirah to about 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Easily.
Then I left.
Probably when you left, there were more than 5. Maybe 6 or 7 probably.
Somewhere in that
sort. Yeah. Because, if you want to have 2 Martin Luther's books, okay, then you already see that it has evolved and branched very nicely. And that is something which is very interesting.
Yeah. And then after me, there was this guy called Bharat. I forget his surname. So Bharat took over. You remember Bharat,
right? Yes.
And then Hema Balaram's lab, exactly. And Bharat did an even better job. So by the time Bharat left, this thing was like a huge room and some 15 almirahs or something. It has now become humongous.
A very, very big one.
Yes. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Eclectic. Bharat was into books in a way even more than I was. So, he actually invited me to have a look.
Very nice.
And I spent quite some time with that library.
Wonderful.
That itself was quite some time.
Okay.
But that was one of the great things. And because I was running the library, essentially I was lending books to the entire institute, and therefore I was also able to chat with other people a lot more.
Absolutely. So, that is something I vividly remember. I think once in a week or twice in a week there used to be this in the evening.
Twice a week, 1 hour.
1 hour, and it was open, and then fabulous. That is some
Ved and Soumya.
Yes,
that was the.
Yes. Because I vividly remember, because the one thing which you kind of encouraged me to take up and read was Agatha Christie, and probably I am the person who read all of the Agatha Christie.
You did?
Yes,
Brilliant.
I ended up actually doing that right when I was in PhD, and that was very, very interesting. The other aspect, Sutirth, I would want to kind of briefly touch upon is a couple of talks you gave in JNCASR as part of Dhwani. Okay. And you probably don't recollect, but you did speak a bit about poetry.
Okay.
Of course, Amitabh Joshi also was talking about it. Maybe now, even recently, he was also given an online talk. I saw that was very interesting. You are also very keen on aspects which were generally not kind of studied by conventional science students, where humanities also played a very critical role. If I understand correctly, you are also into Sufi music at some point of time.
So this is the Qawwali that I talked about.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was courtesy of Professor Joshi.
Okay.
As I said, I had an interest in that, but I didn't have too much of a formal introduction to that.
Yeah.
Partly, the problem with Sufi is that most of the lyrics will be either in Persian or in Urdu.
Yeah.
So you need to have a reasonable understanding of that.
Yes.
Now, since I knew some amount of Hindi, I could do a reasonable job. But the nuances, the shades, that you don't get till somebody sits you and tells you about it. And that's the role that Professor Joshi did. So I had a much better feel for it because of it.
So all this exposure of having kind of a appreciation of humanities. Okay, I'm not telling you may have complete depth, but appreciation of humanities in parallel with, let's say, sciences, what you're doing, is a very important thing, right? Because it really gives you kind of a slightly more broader development. Where was this reading habit really cultivated? At what stage of your life was it?
That was from childhood. That is because my parents, they had a very nice collection of books at home. And when throughout my growing up, all our birthday gifts used to be books.
Books, right?
Yes. At some point, I basically said that, why not convert all gifts into books?
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, we got books at all times. And since at home, we had a very nice collection of Bengali literature. And again, it was a very eclectic collection. We had poetry, we had short stories, we had essays, we had everything. And basically, I had complete access to it.
Very nice.
So I was reading fairly, deeply into Bengali literature when I was in school.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh.
Yes. And then coming to college, the library, didn't have too much other stuffs. But then when I came to JNCASR, again, the library was
superb.
Absolutely superb.
Yeah.
This is courtesy Professor N. Mukunda.
Yes.
You're
right.
Yes. So, people who are not aware of Professor N. Mukunda, is one of our topmost physicists of this country. And very early on, I figured out that if you go to the JNC library, then most of the books that I liked, they seemed to be recommended by Professor N. Mukunda. So after some time, I said, okay, let me reverse it. Now let me pick up anything that he has recommended and let me see how good it is.
That's a nice way of...
And I discovered so much because of Professor Mukunda. I actually told him once.
Oh, wow.
Very nice. He was very tickled.
Amazing. I kind of remember also you visiting JNCASR once in a while, and that whole corridor is still, vividly etched in the minds, where there is a bust and the library and the seminar hall.
Yes.
As you can see, we carry a lot of nostalgia of JNCASR.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the other aspect which is very important is that, and a very unique aspect in your career, is that you immediately made a transition from PhD to a faculty member at ISER Pune. And I am very glad that people who were making decisions took that particular decision, because in today's day and age, I think it would have been probably impossible to do that. Can you tell about that kind of transition, a phase transition, which is
that was
very, very important.
interesting. That was very interesting. Again, a very peculiar phase in my career. So I had a reasonably productive PhD. I had a few papers.
Very good. In fact, you've been very
Whatever.
humble.
I have some. Okay. The point was, and this nobody will believe, I actually failed to get a postdoc.
Is it?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
For about 7 to 8 months, I was writing to pretty much everybody that I could think of, and I was getting nowhere with landing a postdoc.
Wow.
Okay. And during this process, somewhere I heard about this new, Indian Institute of Science Education and Research coming up. So one was in Calcutta, the other was in Pune. And those days, people won't believe this, but the application was through mail.
Snail mail.
Exactly, not email.
Man.
So I actually, I don't even remember. I think there was a form probably. I downloaded that stuff. Or I don't even remember how I came to it, but I still remember the green envelope in which I wrote it. Sent it. Okay. It was more in desperation than in anything else. And then suddenly one day I hear that I said Pune is interested in me.
Wow. Okay.
And I then asked Professor Joshi, my supervisor, what to do. And I still remember his response.
Okay.
His response was, look, if you go out for a postdoc, you'll do a postdoc, and then you will come back, and you will join a job exactly like this. You are getting the job. Just take it. It was so simply and so brilliantly put. At the same time, people around me were giving me completely different kind of advice. Their point was that, look, you have done a PhD, but you still only know about the Indian system. This was the exact term used. Your horizon is not broadened yet. You need to go out. You need to, see the world. You need to understand, things better. Then you come back, that's when you become more mature, and that's when you should think about a faculty position. If you take up a faculty position right now, you are basically, completely killing your career because you won't be able to go anywhere, etc., etc. I said, okay. I heard that too. And then, even fairly senior profs, many of them actually used this argument saying that I should not be taken. But somehow in the end it worked out. And
glad it done.
I'm very glad. I've never regretted it at all. And so that's how I ended up becoming a faculty, and I think it has been okay.
Oh yeah, more than okay. In fact, fantastic. One of the aspect is that transition, especially in terms of sudden freedom to choose a problem and open your own lab, work on problems. How was it?
So for me it didn't matter because I already enjoyed that freedom with Professor Joshi.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, Professor Joshi didn't want me to go into population dynamics. So when I joined his lab, he was actually dropping not even hints. He was basically telling me that, look, evolution is much bigger, broader, deeper, everything. So why not go for evolution? And I was like, no, I'm doing population dynamics. I like population dynamics. And then after our first 4 months, we did something together, and I think he figured out that I enjoy pop dyne really. So he ended up giving me full freedom. So ever since, I have had full freedom with him, and therefore that aspect
has See, that is a very important element, right? So, especially especially in countries like India, that aspect of becoming independent in India is very critical, right? Because many a times, people come with excellent backgrounds and excellent training, and I'm not generalizing here, but sometimes they have difficulty in adapting to the place, especially in resource-challenged environments, where the resource need not be only monetary resource, right? How does one kind of overcome this problem, or at least kind of take this problem into consideration?
See, the point is, it's not merely about resource, it's about the entire ecosystem.
Yes.
Okay. are, let's say, in a lab abroad. I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience. Okay? So we were sitting in India and we were trying to get certain genome sequencing done.
Okay.
And normally it doesn't happen this way, but we were unlucky. We ended up with a very stupid company from Bangalore. So it took us about 1.5 years to get the sequencing done.
Okay. Of some
equalized thing that we were trying to do.
Okay.
And we shouted, we did whatever we could, but that was end of the day. That's how long it took. My student goes abroad. And he is in Harvard, and he is, he goes to the Harvard sequencing facility, and he asks, how long will it take for me to get that? So they tell him that, look, if you give it today, you are going to get it by tomorrow. But if you are in a real hurry, you can tell us, we'll try to give you by the same day evening. Okay. Now, if somebody gets used to that,
yes,
for that person to come to India and face that 1.5 years, it just blows a few fuses.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think the challenge is primarily mental.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have to be able to take all these things in your stride.
Patience,
hell lot of it. Okay. You have to understand that certain bureaucracies will work in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And you have to adapt to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Funds will, fund flow will have its own challenges. So you need to be careful about that. That's about it. They have their own strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly.
We have our own strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. Now, going into biology itself, where you are not only deeply invested as a researcher, but also as a teacher. And your viewpoints on kind of biology as a discipline would be very interesting. One pointed question I have to you is this kind of artificial division sometimes which happens within biology between molecular and the non-molecular aspect. Could you please elaborate how critical is this division? What is the kind of positives or negatives which can bring in? And how this continuum of from molecules to organism is very beautifully illustrated in various different places, including at ICER. You may want to just kind of expand on that thought a little bit more for us.
See, in biology, you have essentially two different lines of thought. Okay, one line of thought finds its origin more in chemistry, which is more descriptive. Okay, just this is how things are. Figuring out how nature is, how nature is. That's about it. So this is the line which many molecular biologists essentially are trained along this line of thought, and therefore for them information is the key. Okay, figuring out information, figuring out how long is this, figuring out which one is interacting, which molecule is interacting with which molecule. That is how they are looking at stuff. Whereas the other one is more physics based, where you think in terms of models. Okay.
Yes.
The explanation of a phenomena can be a model. Right. And you keep on changing your models based on what is it that you are observing and which one works under which scenario. You use a different model, etc., etc. Now, although this difference seems to be trivial, in practice the difference is actually pretty huge.
Huge, is it?
Yes. Okay. Because think about it. Suppose you say that DNA has 4 bases. Now that is truth in a way in which certain mathematical models are not truths.
Okay.
A mathematical model is your best description of how things are.
Okay.
A statement like DNA has 4 bases is a factual statement.
Okay. Yes.
So people who are into this factual, I am figuring out truth which shall stay true forever. Who are in this mindset, for them to look at this somewhat, context specificity of models and slightly, if I find a better model, I will let go of this model, and therefore
adapt it
and
accordingly.
adaptiveness. This comes at a cost. They are not able to make the connection.
See, this aspect is also very interesting, and there's a kind of a parallel even in physics in some particular areas. For example, reductionist viewpoint and a collective viewpoint. If you look at also the famous More is Different kind of essay written by Anderson, there the case is made strongly for going away from that reductionist viewpoint, and the motivation actually is biological systems. Because the moment you really have multi-particle systems in one particular spatio-temporal kind of confinement, the individual is of course important, but the moment you bring in many particles together, the collective itself has its own behavior, which cannot be taken as just only mere sum of the parts. And that is very beautifully kind of illustrated in biology, right?
See, biology means this is one of the main things. We call it by a slightly different name. We call it scale dependence.
Scale dependence. Okay.
So you study a phenomena at multiple scales, and at each scale you are going to get some different insights. Now, in some cases, you will be able to talk about the higher scale mechanistically in terms of the lower scale. But in many cases, you will not be able to do
that.
Okay.
Yes.
And wherever you are not able to do it, that means that is the place where there is some understanding which still needs to be
gained out.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Absolutely.
See, that is why this emergence.
Emergence. Precisely. I was just about to come to that term. Exactly. Although interestingly, Anderson's paper does not even have a word emergence.
Excellent.
But the whole point of view is actually the emergence.
Yes, but because people have a philosophical. I would say it's a problem, a philosophical take on emergence, which I subscribe to, which is emergence is lack of knowledge. Okay. If I can't figure out how the higher order thing works in terms of the lower order things, I call it emergence. But the moment I figure it out, it no longer remains emergence. Okay. So emergence is basically my lack of knowledge.
Okay.
So for example, I know pretty much every single chemical molecule that is inside my body. Okay. I know a lot about how those molecules are interacting with each other. But I don't know that when you put a bullet in my heart, all those molecules are still inside my body, yet I am dead. So how those molecules are making me alive.
Yes.
I don't know that. And therefore I call life as an emergence.
Emergent phenomena. You're right. See, that is actually a fascinating question, right? Because maybe one can even go and understand a bit about the origins, but even if you understand the origins, how it evolves is still a very critical question to be
Absolutely.
honest.
Absolutely. But the point is, we biologists, we have come to terms with it. Okay, we don't get threatened by it. Okay, true. But I think people who are always trying to get ultra mechanistic understanding of things, sometimes they run into problems because at some scale they have brilliant understanding, but you try to go one step higher, the understanding disappears, and they become very uncomfortable.
Wonderful. This is very fascinating. So, going a little bit forward, you also are a very active faculty member within the institution, especially when it comes to teaching, not just within the course curriculum, whatever is taught, and you go beyond that and also conduct a very interesting course, which is slightly more broader in perspective and also has very focused kind of application.
Which one are you talking about? I do two things.
Oh, okay. You can tell both the things. That's the reason.
Tell me which one you had in mind.
Biostat thing.
The stats one. Okay.
We'll come to the molecular biology one. I'm curious also that you are doing molecular biology.
Right.
And that would be something I'd be very keen to understand.
Okay. So we start with the stats. Okay. No, so this is something that I was getting a lot of comments from people that statistics is something that people, that it's just not well taught in India. Okay, I should take that back. India actually has made some very fundamental contributions to statistics.
Yes.
What I'm talking about is biostatistics. Okay, statistics as taught in biology departments. It's not well taught in many places, and therefore when these students, they come, let's say for interviews, etc., they really struggle. Okay, so I have asked many of them, okay, what have you been taught? And the standard answer is mean, median, mode.
Mean, median.
And I said, look, you guys have a full paper on statistics. mean median mode cannot be worth one full paper.
100 marks.
100 marks, exactly. And they say certain other things were taught and we have no idea what they were. So this was something that I was getting a lot. I was also getting a lot of comments from people in industries that many of them, although they are using statistics, they are very uncomfortable because they are using it blindly.
Including in hospitals and other places, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't hear from hospitals. I'm hoping not. Then it is real.
No, because I see that there is a lot of demand among doctors.
Among doctors, yes. But those doctors are doing research.
Okay.
They are not necessarily doing clinical work using these things. No, I was talking more about industries like particularly pharma industry.
Yes.
Which actually has to use a lot of stats.
Yes.
So many of these people actually said that, if you do a course which doesn't go into the mathematics of things, but talks about what is useful.
Yes.
From a very, user's perspective, as I call it, then that is going to be nice.
Okay.
So I said, okay, fine, let's do it. So we started the course, and initially we didn't even know whether we will get enough people to justify a room twice.
But it turned out to be very big, right?
It has become reasonably big. Okay, and particularly during the pandemic when we had to move online, that's when it became really big. So
this information is available on the webpage and other things. Right? Yeah. So I'll anyway link that in the show notes.
Sure.
If interested people would be looking into it.
Sure. So that's how that biostats thing started. The molecular biology thing started slightly differently.
Tell me.
So I was associated with this initiative called the Exciting Science Group.
Yes.
Which was started by a bunch of people from NCL, National Chemical Laboratory, our neighboring institute. And one of them was Dr. Guru Swami. So this was essentially working with municipal schools in Pune and trying to bring, science club, science activities to them and so on. So this started in 2010 and we essentially kept on expanding.
Yes.
But at some point things became rather difficult and I was also not entirely happy catering only to the school segment because when all said and done, our kind of expertise again works better for the college level.
Absolutely right. You're right.
I mean, we can contribute to the school segment, but overall we are much closer to the college segment.
Yes.
So that's when I was thinking what else to do, and that's when again the thing came that these molecular biology molecular biology experiments. Nowadays, all bio courses have them. And yet, if you look at how it is done in colleges, in many places, it's not done, to the level at which they can be done.
Is it because of the infrastructure?
It's because of multiple things.
Or skill?
No. So, number one, these experiments are expensive. Very, very expensive. Therefore, in most places, what they have are demos. They cannot afford for the entire batch. Number two, these things are time consuming. Now, in any college, you have, let's say, a 3-hour slot. So, how much can you break down? And if you end up breaking it down, then it ends up creating all kinds of, how do I say? I mean, when you are teaching an experiment, if you break it down too much, then people kind of lose track of what is happening, how the various components are connecting to each other. And therefore, it becomes, it becomes disjointed.
Yes.
So that is the problem that many students were facing. They knew what is PCR. They knew what was agarose gel electrophoresis. But they didn't know how the two go hand in hand and how they relate to the bigger picture. So this was again the complaint that I was getting from college students as well. So I thought, okay, can we do something along that axis? Now, the reason Pawan was laughing about it was because I don't have too much of a molecular biology expertise.
Well, but knowledge is knowledge.
Yeah. So but courtesy some very generous corporate donors, we were able to attract some funds to hire 2 people full time.
Very nice.
For this,
Very nice.
and those people have the proper knowledge.
Wonderful.
So my job is more to look at the administrative aspects and also to comment on the pedagogical
aspect.
Yeah, they take care of the actual training.
Yeah, and I have heard that the feedback is very strong on that and very good.
Yes.
And it's very heartening to see that there's a lot of interest even in industries for the courses what you're giving.
Yes. So industries are now actually sending their people to us for training.
See, this I want to just kind of press on this particular point. Especially, you can see the value of a basic science education catering to kind of slightly broader questions in society. Even during the COVID period, ISER Pune actually had a testing center and catered very strongly to requirements of the
I
locality.
think they're still sequencing.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. See, increasingly, not just in India, across the world, the relevance or kind of prominence given to basic sciences vis-a-vis, let's say, translational research is kind of not the same, right? But in what way can actually the society be, exposed to this viewpoint? You can see that the benefit from a person who has deep knowledge of the subject and also slightly broader kind of viewpoint is kind of catering to requirements of the industries in the locality, and sometimes it is not valued. Right? And in what way should we really look at this problem? Can you just...
I have a very simple point to make. You use the term translational. What does translational mean? Translating what to what?
What, yes.
So the translation happens, stuffs which have happened in basic science labs at bench scale needs to be translated into industrial scale at the industrial level.
Absolutely.
Right? So, if you cut down on basic research, what exactly are you going to translate?
Translate, yes.
And when?
Absolutely, right. Okay. Absolutely.
So, I have been in touch with many of these industries in the local Pune, Bombay area,
Nice.
and with their R&D divisions.
Okay.
And I have been essentially asking them this question: what kind of stuff do you do? Okay, so see, this is a very common refrain in India that the basic science education is worthless. We are producing undergrads who are completely unemployable, etc.
Yes.
This term has been used.
Absolutely.
So
Overused,
yes. So I actually have written to a large number of industry captains, and I have. So these are like CTOs and chief of the R&D division, etc. And I have asked them that, look, since I'm doing this kind of training, you please tell us that what are the kinds of things that you value? What are the kinds of skills that you want? And okay, obviously, some people are talking about very specific skills for their industry. That's a different ballgame. But if you look at the common denominator for everybody, that is, they have to have a very good understanding of the basics of whatever they are talking about. And here are 8 or 9 skills, which, if they have, will be really useful for us.
Okay.
Those are precisely the things that you teach them in colleges. Okay, those are precisely the things that I'm teaching them in my workshop.
Absolutely.
So, saying that whatever, our basic education is so poor that it is not catering to the industry's requirement, at least whatever responses I have received till now, I don't think that is correct.
That is the case. That's an important point, what you're making.
Yes, absolutely. Now, see, if something is there in the syllabus and a college is unable to teach them, that's a different problem.
Implementation problem.
Exactly. That's an implementation problem. That's not a problem of the syllabus.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
That is not saying that we don't know what to teach.
You're absolutely right. See, a point which is not a counterpoint. For example, there is also a lot of debate on whether people who are trained in engineering should continue to do engineering. Or many a times, for example, engineers turn out to do something which is totally different. Okay. Now, the foundations which they carry as engineers or any student from basic sciences, STEM, so to speak, those skills actually are very useful in various different areas.
Yes, obviously
right?
it is.
It need not be only applicable to the area which is being taught in.
Absolutely. And see, one should also understand that it might even work in the other direction.
Other direction, yes.
So, for example, recently I was at JNCASR attending a felicitation function for Professor Meva Singh.
Oh, yes.
You are aware of Meva Singh, right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, Professor Meva Singh was trained in English literature.
Wow.
And has worked his entire life in primatology. sitting in the Department of Psychology at University of Mysore.
Yes.
Okay.
Amazing. That is.
Now think about it. If a person trained in English literature can become one of the topmost primatologists of the world, so that obviously tells you that it's about how you use your brain.
Absolutely. Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And if you can use your brain properly, you can pretty much go anywhere to anywhere.
Fantastic. No, this is a very fabulous, very, very interesting line of thought, and very valuable too. In fact, that is something which people probably should appreciate. That. Now, one of the things which I generally ask my guests is to describe their research in their mother tongue. And given the fact that you have excellent vocabulary both in Bengali and in Hindi, I am going to actually ask more from you than just merely speak in your mother tongue. I would ask you to speak in both Bengali and in Hindi, just describing in a few sentences what is your research, what is your motivation, and it can be just a very short segment.
Okay, separately I hope.
Yeah, separately. If you want, you can mix, but yeah.
So that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start off with Bengali perhaps. So, আমি কাজ করি ডিসপার্সাল, যার অর্থ হচ্ছে এক জায়গা থেকে অন্য জায়গায় যাওয়া, এক মুভমেন্ট বলে। সো সেই জিনিসটা যদি ইভলভ করে তাহলে পরে তার কি ফলাফল হবে। এখন এটা কেন একটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট প্রশ্ন? এটা এই জন্য একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ প্রশ্ন, কেননা আজকাল এই যে আমাদের চারিপাশে যে আবহাওয়া পরিবেশ সব বদলে যাচ্ছে, এটা বদলে যাওয়ার ফলে বহু জীব জন্তু গাছপালা আছে যারা যদি এক জায়গা থেকে অন্য জায়গায় ঠিকঠাক মুভ না করতে পারে তাহলে পরে তারা বেঁচে থাকতে পারবে না, তারা যাকে বলে এক্সটিংক্ট হয়ে যাবে, লুপ্ত হয়ে যাবে। তো সেই জন্যে ধরা হয় যে আজকালকার এই দুনিয়ায় বহু জীবজন্তুর তারা খুব একটা চাপের মধ্যে আছে, যাকে বলা হয় সিলেকশন প্রেশার, তার মধ্যে আছে আরো ভালো ডিসপার্স করার জন্য। তো যদি ভালো ডিসপার্স একটা জীব করতে চায় তাহলে পরে কি কি ধরনের পরিবর্তন তার মধ্যে আসবে, এইটা হচ্ছে আমার কাজের একটা বিশাল বড় এরিয়া, আমার কাজের একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ ক্ষেত্র। দিস ওয়াজ বেঙ্গলি, নাও আইল ट्रांसफर टू हिंदी। ओके, सो हिंदी में कुछ दूसरा बोलना पड़ेगा क्योंकि ऑब्वियसली बंगला वाला पार्ट तो हिंदी वालों को समझ में आएगा नहीं, तो हिंदी में मैं दूसरा वाला अपना काम बोलता हूँ। सो दूसरा काम हम लोग का ये है कि जब भी हम लोग इवोल्यूशन के बारे में सोचते हैं, हम लोग सोचते हैं कि भाई मानो गर्मी बढ़ गई या फिर मानो ठंडा बढ़ गया तो किस तरह से ऑर्गेनिजम्स जो है, जीव जंतु जो है, उस चीज़ के साथ डील करेंगे। लेकिन जब भी हम लोग ऐसे चीज़ के बारे में सोचते हैं, हम लोग सोचते हैं कि जो वातावरण है, जो एनवायरनमेंट है, वो एक दिशा में जा रहा है। गर्म हो रहा है तो गर्मी बढ़ती जा रही है, ठंड की तरफ है तो ठंडी बढ़ती जा रही है। लेकिन अगर आप सही तरह से सोचें तो गर्मी और ठंडी ये दोनों चीज़ें जो है ये कभी भी हमेशा एक दिशा में नहीं बढ़ती, कभी गर्म होती है तो कभी ठंडी बढ़ जाती है। और आजकल की दुनिया में अगर देखें तो जो तापमान है, तापमान का जो वेरिएशन है, जो उतार चढ़ाव है, वो उतार चढ़ाव बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ता जा रहा है और जिसकी वजह से जो ऑर्गेनिजम्स हैं, जो जीव जंतु हैं, उन लोगों को एक अलग किस्म का चैलेंज फेस करना पड़ता है। सो अगर अब हम लोग मतलब इंसान लोग हैं, हम लोगों को अगर गर्मी बढ़ जाती है तो हम लोग फैन चला देते हैं, अगर ठंड बढ़ जाती है तो हम लोग एक स्वेटर पहन लेते हैं या जैकेट पहन लेते हैं। लेकिन जो बाहर के जो जीव जंतु हैं, मान लीजिए जो कीड़े मकोड़े हो गए या फिर जो बैक्टीरिया हो गए, उनके पास तो ये सब करने का कोई तरीका है नहीं। तो वो लोग अपने देह में, अपने बॉडी के अंदर किस तरह का परिवर्तन लाते हैं, इस तरह के उतार चढ़ाव के साथ जूझने के लिए, ये मेरे काम का एक दूसरा पहलू।
आपका बंगाली और हिंदी उत्कृष्ट और बहुत स्पष्ट है। This is my contribution.
Incidentally, you know what? This is how I get caught.
Okay.
So if you look at my Bengali is more or less accentless.
Yes.
Okay. But my Bengali actually, although I did use a few English words, but by and large I use far fewer English words than many people. And I also use almost zero Hindi words. So people from Calcutta who listen to me, they don't catch me by my accent. They catch me by
words.
the words that I use, and then they say, you cannot be from Calcutta.
No, this is wonderful, Sutirth. See, one of the important aspect is this strength of diversity in terms of the languages, and it also has a lot of implication on thought process, right?
Yes,
because the way you take inputs from your environment is essentially, or I will not say everything, but mainly from a language perspective, right?
Yes.
Because to understand certain things, you will have to understand the word.
Yes.
And that matters a lot, right?
Yes, that matters a huge amount, and it particularly matters in interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Certain emotions, certain behaviors, the nuances of those, if you try to translate it, it doesn't really
work.
Okay. And therefore, no, when you say, किसी से, वो रूठे हुए हैं, and you translate it as he's angry. Now, रूठना and anger
is a
slight difference.
Exactly.
But how on earth do you translate रूठना?
Absolutely right. Absolutely. In fact, that is also a challenge for science.
Yes.
If you really want to express that very specifically.
Yes. If you are into citizen science, it becomes even
bigger. Exactly.
Okay, where people are using vague terms and you are translating them into precise terms. The way people will say it and the way a scientist is going to translate it, if they, the two don't match. All kinds of things will happen.
There will be a lot of variation.
Yes.
So, coming to the slightly even more broader perspective of science, the way it is kind of pursued both in India and across the world, especially from biology viewpoint, mainly also from evolution, ecology viewpoint, where is the world and the India going towards in terms of your own area of research and broader kind of perspective?
See, exciting things are happening. There's no doubt about it. And therefore, from an intellectual point of view, obviously, this is a nice time to be alive.
Yes.
Okay, this is in our area, for example, insights from molecular biology, insights from, different, more and more higher order mathematical models, etc. And now, of course, artificial intelligence and machine learning coming in. We have no idea how that is going to impact, how we extract information from data. So overall, this is certainly exciting time to be around as a scientist, whether you are sitting in India or whether you are sitting abroad.
Yes,
no doubts about that.
That is probably one of the strengths of evolutionary biology and ecology, especially, for example, Professor Gadakar has written a lot about this, that doing this kind of research, because of the fact that India has such a huge kind of wealth of ecological diversity and kind of resource, there's a lot to always kind of explore, right?
Yes. That is true. See, science, I'll take that back. Biology in particular, there are a few low-hanging fruits still left.
Yes.
Whereas, for example, physics, I don't think there are too many left.
Yes.
My mathematics, there are even fewer probably.
They have to dig deeper.
They have to really reach high.
Yeah. No, that is a very fascinating thing, because that would actually also set course for how the whole area is going to evolve going forward. And is there also kind of very strong dependence on evolution and ecology research and climate change? I assume there is a lot of work going on.
Of course, there is a lot of work simply because the rate at which the environment is changing is kind of unprecedented, at least in human memory. Okay, it might have happened early on, and therefore one thing is for sure that a lot of stuffs are going to be altered. Okay, I mean the pandemic was just one little glimpse of it. Much more deadly things can happen, and therefore people are trying very hard to figure out things like, okay, where is the next outbreak going to come from? The outbreaks that are already there circulating around, what is the possibility that they will become bigger? Okay. If we have to create a proper defense against, so for example, even after such a long and strong history of vaccines, we still don't have good vaccines or medicines against viral infections.
Absolutely.
And if, for example, COVID were a bacterial infection, we would have been, the pandemic wouldn't have been a pandemic.
Exactly.
So now, how do we take care of viruses? I think this is a good time to ask that
question, right?
Okay.
From an evolutionary viewpoint.
Exactly. So what do we do? And also about us humans. So for example, I mean, you probably are aware of this, that depression is supposed to be an epidemic.
It's almost at the level of
epidemic all over the world.
Yes.
There is hardly any country where it is not the case.
Yes.
And people have actually posited that this is probably because an evolutionary mismatch.
Oh, is it?
Yes. Wow. An evolutionary mismatch between how we evolved and how we are now.
Okay.
In terms of interpersonal relationships and other things. So this is still at the level of a theory, but people are coming up with all kinds of prescriptions for this is how you lead your life, so that you don't get into things like depression or diabetes or obesity.
Yes.
And many of those are not really, take this medicine, take that medicine. Many of those are like, go out, talk to people.
Yes.
Okay. Exercise, these kinds of exercises, not any normal exercise, these kinds of exercises, etc., etc. So, for evolutionary biology in particular, this is a rather brilliant time. Lots of things are happening, and I see a good future.
No, other aspect I have to mention that in evolutionary biology, the jugalbandi between the modeling experiments and also theoretical kind of analytical viewpoints, kind of very nicely
analytical simulations, experiments, old data.
The old data, history, anthropology also kind of as important. This is very fascinating. So, what are the kind of problems you are working on now? Right now.
So, one of the problems that we are working on is this evolutionary mismatch thing, which is why the example straight away came to my mind. So, we are trying to figure out that if you have evolved for dispersal, and now if you end up getting into slightly different kinds of environments, does that make you more vulnerable to those environments compared to another population which has not evolved? So that is one big one. The other kind of evolutionary mismatch thing that we are talking about is in terms of microbiota. So that is supposed to be one of the big mismatches right now because of our modern medicine, all kinds of antibiotics, very different food habit. The gut microbiota of most modern humans is very different from what we have evolved with. And that is supposed to be one of the big reasons for many, many issues, both physical and mental. So we are trying to see if we can, from a very how do I say? Obviously, we are not working with humans. We are trying to study it in flies, but we are trying to see if we can come up with some principles which will then apply
across the scales. Very fascinating. So, you also have a big group. How big is the group now?
No. So, I have 1, 2, 3 active PhD students.
And very nice. That's a good number.
Students,
Great, Sutirth. this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm
As
sure
always,
that
there's something that I have to say over here, that Pawan and I have been having these kind of conversations since our PhD days, and it's a matter of great luck for me that Pawan ended up in the same institute with my
pleasure.
colleague.
Yes.
So we have been continuing these conversations
yeah.
all over, in our offices, in the corridors, at the marketplace, wherever we meet. So yeah, it is as usual. It's great chatting with you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I can assure you that this will be first of many conversations which we're going to have with Sutirth on this podcast, because there are plenty more. Because just barely scratch the surface, and there's a lot of also interesting input which we get. And Sutirth, are you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter.
Twitter. So I'll be linking his Twitter account on show notes, and also in the on the advertisement which I'm going to put it across. And of course, we will keep this conversation going forward. And I'm extremely thankful to you for coming on this podcast, where we try to humanize science. That is what we are trying to do. And,
I think science is pretty human. I think what makes us human are how you portray them in Hollywood.
True.
And B, the fact that much of the time, we simply are too busy to talk like this to people.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we can assure you we are as human
as
any other
absolutely.
else.
That is also an important thing. The voice of the scientist has to actually go out, and Pratidwani is kind of an attempt.
Literally the voice of the scientist.
Literally the voice of the scientist which is coming out.
Right.
So thank you again, Sutirth. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
And thank you very much. Thanks a lot. This is Pratidwani, where we humanize science.